Bonus episode 8.5, Racial Implications of Gun Control, a roundtable discussion.
You're listening to Guns Guide to Liberals, the podcast where we explore ideas and techniques that help you break down partisan barriers, build rapport across the aisle, and make a more persuasive case for the Second Amendment. I'm John Hauptman.
And I'm Sarah Hauptman. This episode is going to be a little bit different. We've got some excerpts from a conversation we had at SHOT Show with our friends from Open Source Defense and Douglas Jefferson, the Vice President of the National African American Gun Association. So this was kind of an informal roundtable discussion, and we wanted to share it because it went in some interesting directions. It was a longer conversation, so we're going to release it in chunks based on topic. This week is a discussion we had about race in the gun community and some of the racial implications of gun control and the differences between talking points and chanting points.
This whole conversation that we were able to have at SHOT Show with the crew from Open Source Defense and National African American Gun Association was phenomenal. We winged it. We had no idea what we were in for. And
we started planning it actually on the couch. We were just chatting like, okay, here's what we're going to talk about. And the conversation became interesting enough that we're like, okay, just stop. We need to start recording now.
Yeah, I had a feeling that as soon as we walked in the door, we were going to want to be rolling because anything we said was going to be the genesis of some conversation or another. And so we have a huge pool of content, which we're going to edit and put together for you guys in digestible chunks so you don't have to listen to us ramble for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with Open Source Defense, I highly recommend you follow them. They are some of the people in the gun community that are generating a lot of the ideas we talk about on the show. And so I think reading their blog and following their social media is kind of inspirational for me as far as like what are new and interesting discussion topics, like what's new in the world and what interesting thing have they broken down in a different way that I've never heard before.
Yeah, they address this issue with genuine novelty, which I find very refreshing, especially once you get used to hearing a lot of the same things over and over again.
You know, the gun debate is pretty stale, and we've all been doing it for a while, and it's really a breath of fresh air when you get someone coming at it with a new perspective like this.
So when we found out that we were all going to be at SHOT Show together, I reached out to them as fast as I could and said, we are having a podcast.
Part 1, we're not sure how many parts we're going to actually do this in. We're kind of just breaking it down by topic. And we're going to intersperse this with some of our regular content as well. So it's not going to be all bonus episodes. We're staying true to our original mission, but we feel like these conversations add an extra dimension to the gun debate. So that's where the value is, I think.
We've lucked into a great opportunity here at SHOT Show, now that everyone is kind of in the same place. The information and the conversations that we have here at Guns Guide to Liberals are all coming from somewhere else, largely. And we've gotten lucky enough to be in the same room with the people who generate a lot of those conversations with us. So let's go around the room and introduce yourselves, because these are some of my favorite sources of information.
All right. So this is Douglas Jefferson, Vice President of the National African American Gun Association.
Hey, I'm Chuck Rossi, a co-founder of Open Source Defense.
And I'm BJ Campbell, writer for Open Source Defense and also for the Medium blog Hand Waving Freakoutery, which covers some gun stuff.
You should definitely be subscribed to the Open Source Defense newsletter and reading Hand Waving Freakoutery.
So can I ask, what was it about the Second Amendment that resonated with you, that turned you into someone that just tried a gun for fun into an activist? Like, what made that transition for you?
So for me, it started, I have to go back to my youth. So my grandfather is still alive today, 90 years old. He still keeps a shotgun by his bed to this day. And so I remember when I was 8 or 9 years old, go to grandpa's house on the weekend, go to church with him on Sundays. And, my curiosity, I see that shotgun by the bed. And I knew enough not to mess with Grandpa's shotgun because that was, you just don't do that. There was a very large vase with switches that would, teach me the error of my ways, if not. So I asked Grandpa, I was like, hey, why do you got the shotgun by your bed? And so Grandpa grew up on a farm and he told me, it's like, well, it's defend against 4-legged and 2-legged critters. I just kind of nodded and said, okay. And I went off and played with my cousins. So I always kept that in the back of my mind. And so moving into firearms with anything that I do, I like to know the history of what it is that I'm doing. And so naturally I started looking, it's like, well, what has been the involvement of Black people in firearms in this country? And so, you see what on TV, most media that's out there, whether fiction or nonfiction, is pretty negative when it comes to portrayal of Black people in firearms. But I knew, like everything you see on TV, like that's not actually the truth of what's going on. So I started researching, and then I was just blown away by the depth of heroes and heroines that were out there that are part of this very long and proud Black tradition of arms, of Black people that have taken up the Second Amendment to defend their rights and to push forward the fight for all of the rights of the Constitution due to Black citizens of this country. And so seeing that, I was just really encouraged to bring this message to other African American people, because I'm like, I had to do a bunch of research for this, and this isn't information necessarily easily available, readily available. It's like, people need to know this. If they knew this, if only they knew this, they would value the Second Amendment as much as myself. And so I started on that journey and meeting up with Philip Smith. He agreed with that. And so actually we worked together, and we developed for our organization a new members orientation course where we take people through 3 distinct modules. We have one module that talks about our organization, when it was founded, our vision, our mission, our values. We have a module that takes them through gun safety, so talking about your basic firearms handling safety rules. And then my favorite module, one on the Black tradition of arms, where we talk about the highlights of the heroes and the heroines, those highlights in history, where Black people used arms to defend themselves and their communities. As Nicholas Johnson says in his book, Negroes and the Gun, the Black tradition of arms, to use that Second Amendment to bridge the gap where the government, no matter how benevolent, can't be there to protect you just because of simple time and distance, or what has been more historically accurate for the African American community, the government would not be there to protect you because of incompetence, because of moral cowardice, or because of outright malice towards you and your community. And so that's really the message that we have embraced and have pushed to spread throughout the African American community, into connecting that fight of embracing Second Amendment rights to that larger fight of it supporting the gaining and sustaining of all rights of African American people in this country.
If I could jump in for a second, that was one of the things that really impressed me about speaking with Doug the first time today was, I'm sitting on the floor of SHOT Show, and we're in the Glock booth, right? And it's got the nice carpet, because they got the best carpet at the whole place. Everyone's laughing because
them and the NRA.
Oh, well, I didn't
all of the memory foam padding underneath
right,
it.
it's like 6 inches of
and I'm looking around,
bliss.
and you're surrounded by 20, 30,000 people, and they have the same thing. They have I have a gun because the authority can't get there to protect me, or the authority might not, and I think into the arguments, right? I mean, the arguments just like they pervade me, they bother me. That's why I started writing. And one of the arguments is always that you're paranoid, you'll be fine, right? And I don't think that the fact that the Black community's experience with guns has been an obvious counterexample really sunk into me until today, right? And I always kind of knew it. I mean, you always kind of think about it, but I don't really think it sunk in until today, standing in that booth. And I think that that's something that if we could get that experience to truly filter in like tendrils into the gun community, then, and for them to truly understand it, that not only would it provide, I don't want to say ammunition, but it would provide a talking point in the gun rights discussion, but it also could be something that could bring, the races together and stuff like that, not just within the gun community, but maybe without it. And I think that's a very powerful thought to me. That was what struck me today. One of the most important things that struck me today, actually. In fact, so I wanted to say that.
Yeah, I like that. It's a point of common ground, and you can leverage that inside and outside the gun debate. just to improve relationships in general, which I think is a good thing to do, for sure.
It's also, unfortunately, a really good example of, especially the gun portion of the example of the state's relationship to black citizens. It really brightly highlights the paternalism that the government and the media have towards the black community.
Absolutely.
There's like this really disappointing constant push that I have become aware of, where like the news media and the government and their attempts to intervene into that community are kind of like infantilizing and paternalistic, that consistently assumes that this is a group of people who can't handle empowerment, or the subtext of gun control especially is a great example of, oh no, you don't get to do that, or you're not ready for it, or something really like deeply insulting and demeaning. And it's an example of, I think it's one of the brighter examples of how demeaning those larger attitudes are, and it's a good entry point into being able to recognize it.
Yeah, and it's not just that it's demeaning, which it is, but it's also a form of gaslighting. So it's like, not only are we going to call you paranoid for thinking that the authorities aren't going to be there to protect you, but we're also going to completely forget about the time when the authorities were the ones under the hoods. You know, like They were the ones wearing the hoods. And that kind of gets missed, I think, in the gun debate. And that there is a deep history there of a time in this country where you could not trust the authorities at all.
No, and a recent time which we're still grappling with. It's not some distant past. It's not like, oh, well, the Romans did this thing, and so it's ancient history. It's like, no, your grandparents did this thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so like there's this amnesia about the failures of society. I think that that informs the constant gaslighting of you're paranoid, or you don't need that, or we've outgrown this, or the Second Amendment is obsolete. I'm like, according to what? A decade ago? According to when like the city of Philadelphia bombed the MOVE people in my lifetime? Like, this isn't ancient history. This is yesterday.
And it's right here in our cultural memory too. Right. You know, that's a resource.
I mean, even just going back, you don't even have to go back as far as MOVE. Like the most recent example that comes immediately to my mind was Hurricane Katrina in 2005.
Yeah.
You had literally, the government was not there, period, point blank. Very complex reasons why it wasn't. But the point of the matter is, when those people needed government support, when they expected to be supported and protected like any other citizens, they weren't. They were left to their own devices, and many people lost their lives because of it. So I really take great offense when people imply that for some reason myself and my community should embrace these type of draconian gun laws, because the history of draconian laws, period, in the United States is enforcement against the black community, over incarceration of people in our community. I mean, let's look at the war on drugs. I mean, the so-called war on drugs, which started, back the tail end of the 70s. And so you had these draconian laws, like 40 years or 4 decades plus of just, lock people up and throw away the key. And now we're looking at it like, maybe that wasn't such a great idea, because we see how it's led to so many other complex issues in our society.
The conversation that we started over on the couch, where we had to like rush over here and fire up the microphones, was the difference between the chanting point of gun control is racist and the profound reality that these kinds of systems of human control have disproportionately racial outcomes. And the subtle difference between those two things, and how important it is to make the case for the latter, and how the former almost doesn't do us any good.
Right. The first one ends the discussion and the second one begins the discussion. So part of our goal here is to begin the discussion and to make it a deeper discussion. So I think that gives you an opening to do that, whereas just saying gun control is racist, it doesn't give you much of an opportunity to continue that.
So open source defense jumped into this, and I'm happy to be the one who stuck my toe in the pool on that one. And we had, I don't know, it was maybe middle of December, we dropped an article about looking at the mathematical implications of how the current Virginia proposal is going to impact Virginia. And, here we are at SHOT Show, and just only this past Monday, we had 22,000 people marching in the streets for gun rights, including gay folks and black folks and everything else like that. And the media is trying to portray this as a white nationalist thing. Now, I will step
more gaslighting.
Yeah, right. Well, there are people in the pro-gun community who are racist, and we need to acknowledge that, and that is a problem for the gun community to try and resolve.
Sure. And
however, like when I saw the numbers, like I was waiting for the numbers. I wanted to see how many people were out there. The Richmond police estimated 22,000 people. When we talked to Cam Edwards 2 days ago, he was there, and he says, "Nah, that number's low. It was like 35." That's what he said. And I don't know what the right answer is, but let's pretend it's 22. Okay, that's more than 3 times the on-the-ground force capacity of the Virginia National Guard. Okay, so when they were talking about, there was, let's be charitable, there was one state rep who said something about, well, I guess Northam could send in the National Guard. And in our article, we were like, yeah, the National Guard's not big enough. Let's try and figure out how many people this is going to impact, right? So the argument there, I'm going to just summarize the whole thing in 3 minutes. How many people is it going to affect? If you go back and you sort of back of the envelope the thing, you look at something like 60% of gun owners own rifles, and 29, something like that, percent of Virginians own guns. And then I think this is a very low estimate, but if you say 10% of those people own banned weapons on the ban list, you're looking at 150,000 people, 140,000, something like that. And nobody's going to comply with this. The compliance rates in New Zealand are 10%. They have a buyback, and they don't have the Second Amendment. So
the compliance rate in New Jersey for banned magazines is literally 0.
Yeah,
and that's just 30-round magazines.
Right. And there's a mag ban in Virginia too, right? And anybody who breaks this is going to be a Class 6 felon, right? So how are you going to enforce that, right? Well, the folks if you had the most anti-gun in the world sheriff out in a rural county in Virginia, they could not enforce this. There's no way they could. They would probably be locking up their friends, but more to the point, they'd be putting their employees in grave danger. They don't have the equipment. They're not trained for kick down doors, And so, of course, even if they didn't want to be a sanctuary, they'd have to be a sanctuary, right? And then
effectively, in practice, there's no way to execute or enforce the law. So you're stuck with just letting it go.
Exactly. The sanctuary thing is being painted as an ideological opposition, and it is, but even if it wasn't, it wouldn't matter, because the sanctuary is a de facto thing that is going to happen no matter what. Even if nobody declared themselves a sanctuary, the thing would still never get enforced there, right? So where would it be enforced? And if you look at the demographic maps, or if you look at the voting maps, okay, the Democratic folks who won, and they won largely on a gun control, platform. Okay, so all right, kudos. Those districts were D.C. suburbs, Richmond, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, right? And all my family's from Virginia. I'm very familiar with Virginia. Those are also the places that didn't pass the sanctuary laws, and those are also the places that have the SWAT teams with the MRAP tanks that can gear up and get photos taken of them that look like downtown Ferguson, right? Mm-hmm. So the only place that this could be enforced is those areas that technically put it on the table, right? And are they going to send an MRAP tank into a golf course community? No. N-O. No. They're going to find the only place they're going to send it is where Black Lives Matter. Right? So then what we've got here is we've got a system where it's like, okay, we've got a law, and the law supposedly has a good intent, making your community safer, supposedly. But as it matriculates through the system, even if you believed wholeheartedly in this law, and even if you believed wholeheartedly in everything that it's going to do, and you believed, and I would say this is an erroneous belief, that it was going to have an impact, the actual implementation of the law is going to be to kick down doors in the ghetto, right? It's going to be in stressed communities. And so here's the thing. Like, some people, like, there is a charged language around the word systemic racism. But if you believe that there are instances where the system itself, as it is applied, creates racially different outcomes, and that is a problem, and if you were to define that as systemic racism, then this law is systemic racism. It couldn't not be. It could not be.
Right. The only places that have the A, the will, and B, the capability of enforcing these kinds of prohibitions are large cities with big police forces. So if you look at, for example, distributions of drug arrests and drug addiction, there are plenty of rural communities that have like serious meth and opiate problems, but they've got such a small sheriff's department that they can't really do anything with the addiction or production of these drugs. So what you wind up with are a lot of arrests and a lot of the prison's capacity being filled from locations where there is a larger, more effective police force acting on a more densely populated area. That's going to occur in a city. You have more people, more police, same problems. And when you look at distributions of populations from urban to rural, you're looking at a very largely black and white difference. So when you have laws that are best enforced in cities, generating the most arrests, you are arresting black people.
Yeah, I'm going to break this down even further, and I will sum this up in one sentence, is that if you create an unenforceable law, the only people that will ever feel the impact of that enforcement are the people that have contact with law enforcement. And who's that going to be?
Yeah. So let's sell it 3 or 4 steps back, because we were talking about on the couch before we started the podcast, and we were like, oh, we got to just start recording this stuff. We were talking about, if I recall, it was like chanting catchphrases versus what was it?
Well, so you've got a lot of talking points turn into chanting points.
Talking points and chanting points. Okay, so the chanting point would be the drug war is racist. The talking point would be the drug war, as it is framed, is being enforced in an obviously racist manner. Right?
Yeah, clearly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you can, and now let's talk about our liberal conservative or blue tribe, red tribe divide here. That is something that a blue tribe person will be like, yes, I get both of those, and I understand the distinction. But we can make the exact same distinction with gun rights, and we lose some of them off the train, right?
I think so, and I think some of that has. I think some of that has to do with political isolation, insofar as there are a lot of liberals who don't know any conservatives and a lot of conservatives who don't run with any liberals, and so they have stereotyped ideas of each other. And there are a lot of liberals who think of gun ownership as a white condition, and that as a primarily white conservative practice, and that more than necessarily solving the problems of violence and suicide, that attacking guns is a culture war attack, and that if they can win on gun control, they can gain political, social, and moral power over a class of people that they dislike. And they think that, well, what we can do is we can score points and have actual power over some people that we've been arguing with since the, Reagan administration, except for the fact that the policy will backfire in a way that will generate results that they already dislike in other circumstances. So instead of winning a fight against some vaguely stereotyped class of people that they've been fighting this culture war against, they're going to inflict an enormous amount of collateral damage against people who they at least ostensibly claim to care about and get moral cachet from that.
I think that's probably a pretty good analysis. I don't know that I have any major qualms with what you said. I think the frustrating thing, though, is that the one thing I might have a qualm with is that, I've got a lot of liberal friends. I've got people who are like ad buyers in the Democratic Party. But, I know one guy played soccer with him, and he was supposed to fly to D.C. to be part of Hillary's transition team, right? Okay. I was trying to put myself in his position while you were talking. And I think that what he would have a problem with is, would he virtue signal in that? Is it all about virtue signaling and control? It seems like that from the gun owner's perspective. I think there's probably some portion of that, but I do think that a lot of them are, I think they mean well. They just don't understand the implications of their actions. And so I do think that we need to be charitable to the fact that they believe that they mean well. And most people mean well.
Oh, for sure.
Because people are good, generally speaking.
I'm glad you brought that up because one of the problems we have in the gun world is we are great at identifying problems and we're great at focusing on problems. But one area where we kind of fall flat is we're not always good at focusing on solutions. So what do you guys think that we can do about these problems that we've identified?
I think one thing, so Sarah, you mentioned it when we were just chatting around the couch just before the podcast, and we're interested in doing maybe an episode where we talk about how to talk to Black and brown folks. And my comment to that was that I think we really need to flip that on its head and talk about, like, how do you listen to Black and brown folks? Because I think if we get the listening part right first, the talking will come quite naturally. And Black and brown people, we're very, very open to talking about how we feel and what our experiences are, especially if someone is actually listening and listening with the intent of working to develop some solutions to those issues. But far too often, that's not the case. Case in point, when Chuck and BJ and John were talking about chaining points versus talking points. And, the gun control is racist versus gun control as it is designed is enforced in a racist manner. Far too often, the chain of gun control is racist is used by individuals that don't really have the best interests of the Black community in mind. They want to use it to score cheap talking points, cheap political points in an argument where, sure, they can go back and high five their other buddies in the 2A community, but they're not really gaining any supporters from the other side. And they're certainly not bringing in Black people into the conversation because, we're just as observant as anyone else. We can see when someone's being genuine and when they're not.
Right. I think a lot of times people use that as a gotcha rather than as a genuine opportunity for discussion.
Right. Or it's not coming from a place of enlightenment. It's coming from, when someone says, well, gun control is racist, that's a way of saying not that they have a more enlightened, complex, or sophisticated view of the problem. In some cases, they can use it as a way to just say, well, you are racist too.
Exactly.
Not that there's any kind of genuine, authentic care for the plight of other people.
Yeah, and I think this is another byproduct of burnout as well, is that people have gone into arguments in good faith and gotten burned by bad faith arguments on both sides. And so we've got a lot of kind of backwards history there that we have to kind of work on healing before we can even get to the points that we want to get across. So I think that's where a lot of these relationship skills come into it.
I think this leads into a good conversation we could have with Chuck about, well, how do we actually have these conversations if we're segregated into bubbles and echo chambers?
You've been listening to Guns Guide to Liberals, the bonus episode from our roundtable discussion with Douglas Jefferson and open source defense. In the next bonus episode, we'll hear from Chuck Rossi about what he learned being on the ground floor of 5 successful startups in Silicon Valley, and how being the only gun guy at Facebook influenced his perceptions of the gun debate and the culture war.
And what's really up with the conspiracy to suppress gun culture on Facebook? Find out next week.
Man, you guys are good. This is pretty heavy. I thought we were going to talk about our favorite 1911 or something.
2 world wars.
Well, look, we're not here to be divisive, okay? So we're going to avoid things like 9mm versus
Religious
45.
arguments. Okay.
Right.
And
It needs to be understood. Chuck doesn't like 1911s at all. So
Heresy.
So
Apostate.
not true. It's kind of true, actually.
and we'll be back after this break to cut each other's throats. Now.
A word from our sponsor, the AARP.
You guys are killing me. So I don't like 1911s especially. I have 4 of them, which I think is the normal gun owner response to, like, even the gun you don't like, you kind of like secretly. So that's fine.